So thanks again, Kurt, to have you. It's very nice to have you here. I'm going to introduce you in Portuguese first, and then I'll hand to Artur. We are already Portuguese. Pessoal, sejam muito bem-vindos aí. O Kurt vai falar sobre como motivando aí a si mesmo e aos outros, o que a ciência comportamental pode ajudar a gente, né? Como a gente já falou pelas mensagens aí, o Kurt é um cientista comportamental, palestrante, ele é um líder aí reconhecido em motivação humana, behavior change, mudança de comportamento, né? E por mais de 20 anos tem atuado aí com empresas globais. E ele também é fundador e presidente do Grupo, que é uma agência de comunicação e behavior change. E um dos pontos que também a gente tem falado aí, ele é um dos cofundadores do Behavioral Groups, que a gente considera aí um dos principais, né, e mais legais podcasts na área, super divertido. A gente espera ouvir um pouco dele sobre isso aí. E todo esse seu trabalho aí, ele fala, né, que concentra em compreender a maneira de influenciar positivamente o comportamento das pessoas. Então, é isso, um grande prazer. A gente faz parte de uma rede juntos aí, Diversify Global, com o Sebastian e outros. Foi um prazer conhecê-lo e muito feliz aí dele estar com a gente hoje. Artur.
Mudando para o inglês agora, tá, pessoal? Good evening, everybody. Kurt. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm gonna do a brief introduction. Kurt is a sought-after consultant, speaker, and recognized leader in human motivation and behavior change. For over 20 years, Kurt has worked with global companies to apply behavioral science principles to drive change in their organizations. He's the founder and the president of the Lantern Group, a behavior change and communication agency. He's also the co-founder with Tim Holohan of the Behavioral Groups and Weekly Groups podcast, where they interview leading academic and business executives from around the world and explore how they apply behavior science to their works and lives. All his work focuses on understanding ways to positively influence how people behave. Kurt's recent work has focused on understanding how people make purposeful change. He's also one of the leading experts in the world of the 4-drive model of motivation and how is it implemented inside organizations. Specifically, his focus has been on understanding the drivers of change, increasing the effectiveness of reward programs for sales representatives, maximizing the impact of extrinsic rewards, and developing behavior effectiveness blueprints that align behaviors with strategies. So, Kurt, thank you so much for being here with us. Without further ado, the floor is yours. Your mic is muted. There you go.
The wonderful thing of the internet and Zoom meetings, right? Thank you. Excited to be here. I am excited to talk to a wonderful group of people, hopefully share some insights with you, but also I want to hear from you because I know one of the things that we really focus in on, at least within behavioral groups and some of the work that I do, is that behavioral science is contextual, and that this is the concept that what happens in the United States is probably going to be a little bit different than what happens in Brazil, and is going to be different than what happens in Europe and different than happens in Australia. And so I want to understand more from your perspective, as well as sharing some of the things that we've been working on in various different pieces of this. And so thank you for having me here. Really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody, hopefully share a little bit of some of the insights that we have. And what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to share my screen here, so give me a second as I make sure that I have this, and want to make sure I click share sound. Wonderful. Okay. Our people, there we go. Hopefully we can see this. So want to talk to you about motivation. So a lot of the work that I do, both from in my actual job within the Lantern Group, but also some of the people that we talk to on the podcast, focus in on how to motivate people. And so part of this is about motivating if you are a leader within an organization, or even just part of any organization. How do you motivate those around you? How do you motivate your team, your company, but also your peers and other factors in there. So we'll try to look at a little bit of that. But also this can be applied to ourselves. So I know one of the things that I always kind of look at is, hey, sometimes I need to have better motivation around myself. And so try to apply some of these principles into what we're doing as a person, as just a person who is out there trying to make their life better and do different things. And so I want to start with just this concept that says, hey, we have brains up here, but one of the things that happens with our brains is they like to fool us. And so this is true in motivation as well as in a number of other pieces to do that. So I'm going to start and just kind of demonstrate this. And I'm going to show you a picture on the very next slide. And it's in the picture, there's going to be two blue lines. Okay, and the two blue lines are going to be one on the left and one on the right. And when I first show the image, I want you guys to think and just look, which of the two lines is longer? The one on the left or the one on the right? And then we'll have you take a look at this, but just initially, which of the two blue lines is longer? Here we go. So is the blue line on the right or is it the blue line on the left? If you had to guess, which one is longer? And you can put it in chat if you want, or otherwise, just open up. But just from looking at that, now some of you might know that there's probably some little trick to this. So I will apologize for those who have seen this before or know. But the idea here is that for most people, the way that our eyes see this and then our brain takes this is that on the right, that line looks longer because of the way the angles work with the other lines. But in fact, if we look at this and we do this, we can see that these two lines are exactly the same. Now, this is a visual illusion. We have lots of visual illusions that you can see. You can Google up. They're wonderful. They're fun. And I bring this up just because the fact of the matter is that while we still have this, we see that these two lines are the same. If I go back and I put that in there and you look at it again, for most people, it still feels like the right one is longer. And we know that. We know that they're the same, but we have to actually really think hard about how those two lines are the same and really look at that. But our brains like to fool us. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how that happens, not just with lines and visual pieces, but in our behavior, and why sometimes our behavior doesn't match with what we would like it to be or what we think it should be. And this comes in with motivation as well. And so when we think about this, I'm going to tell a story, and I'll tell this story, and it's about incentives as we think through this, but take it from a larger picture, because I think it applies in on a lot of different things. So the story is this. Back in 1937, Gustav von Koningswald, who is a name I'm sure everybody is familiar with. No? Everybody know who Gustav von Koningswald was? Gustav von Koningswald was he was a paleontologist. He is looking to discover early human ancestors, basically going out and looking in archaeology, looking for bones, looking for different history. And he was working in Java, in Southeast Asia, on the island of Java. And if anybody knows anything about archaeology and kind of doing this, when they find bones, structures, and different things, they're usually in small pieces. They're not like, you don't find a full skull typically. You don't find full, they're broken up after this. And so you have to put all these pieces together, and it's hard work because they're not always right next to each other. They can be spread out in different pieces. And he had a small team. And what he was really looking for is he was looking for a skull, because the skull is the ability to be able to say, yes, this is definite a humanoid, or is this more of an ape history. So he was looking for a humanoid skull that he could look and see if this was a ancient ancestor of Homo sapien. And basically what he decided to do is, it was a lot of work and he only had a small team. So he decided to enlist the help of the local villagers. And with the local villagers, what he was doing was he said, hey, I will pay you 10 cents for every skull piece that you bring me that is part that we can put together. And it sounded fantastic. And within the first week, he was really excited because the villagers had brought him lots and lots of skull pieces. And those skull pieces were fitting together. He was putting this big jigsaw puzzle of a skull back together. And shortly, he had an entire humanoid skull, which he realized was an earlier ancestor. It was actually this idea, it's called Homo, I'm gonna say this wrong, Pithecanthropus P. robustus. Basically, it was Homo erectus. If anybody is historical thing, Homo erectus. He had discovered the first example of Homo erectus, which was fascinating and fine. But subsequently, he found out that, hey, there was something wrong. Can anybody guess again what might have gone wrong with his plan that he did? What might have been one of the things that happened? So the villagers had indeed brought him these skull fragments, but they were getting 10 cents per piece. And so they had actually had an almost full skull in one piece that they had. But instead of giving him one piece, they said, wait, if I break this up into multiple pieces, I will earn a lot more. And that's what they did. So they actually took the skull piece that would have been pretty intact and only a couple pieces missing and made it into multiple number of pieces. So hundreds of pieces, in fact, as opposed to, I think, the 3 pieces that they originally had. That being said, if Gustav would have understood some human behavior and incentives and motivational concepts, he might have changed the way that he designed his incentive plan instead of offering a 10 cent per piece thing, and he would have gotten a much better result at the end of that. So again, setting up a system in place to drive motivation worked, but did it work in the way that he thought it would work fully? And so that is one of the things that we're going to talk about here. So with that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about theory, a model of employee behavior. And again, this is about employee motivation, but again, I think it applies to a broader perspective. And then we'll get into some behavioral science principles, and then we'll have time to open up for questions. And feel free, if you want to make sure the elements that you, if you have questions, go ahead and add that in. And yes, the snake effect, as somebody mentioned in the in there, the idea that, hey, there's we'll pay per snake, and people start breeding snakes, right? So there you go, in the towns. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 4 drive model. That was one that Artur mentioned at the beginning. We've done a lot of work on this. It was originally developed by 2 Harvard professors, Professor Paul Lawrence and then Nitin Noria. Professor Noria is the head of the business school, the dean of the business school, still to this day. So they brought in this idea of what is really motivating employees. And if we can, get down to the bare essence of this. And what they identified were 4 underlying drives. Now, that's not saying that there's not other drivers of motivation, but these are 4 main drivers of motivation in the workplace. And I like this model because it talks to a number of different pieces. We've, for most of you, you understand extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, and a lot of the different models of motivation really only focus in on one or the other. This one combines both. And so their first piece of this is that they have this drive that they've identified as the drive to acquire and achieve. This idea that we are driven to achieve resources, things, materials, objects that improve our lives. So this is money. This is your incentive plan. This is a bonus at the end of the year. This is the plaque on the wall that says, I won this award. All of those things drive us. And there's been research that shows, that has been kind of demonstrated, that said, hey, after a certain dollar amount, money no longer motivates. The more recent research has shown that that isn't always true, that, yeah, there is a difference between the level of motivation that happens, but there's always this element of motivation from different things. It's a classical economic element of diminishing returns. So for instance, if I am making 50,000 US and I offer a bonus of $5,000, that's pretty motivating for most people. That's 10% of what I would make normally. If I offer that same $5,000 US bonus to somebody who's making $250,000 a year, it still has a motivational pull, but not to the same impact as somebody who is making 50,000. And in addition to that, even if I offered 10% of that 250,000, I might have to increase the amount of that to get the same motivational pull because of elements about what they can afford in different factors of their life. That being said, it still is a draw. But what I like about this model is it says it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't say, hey, if we just pay people more, they'll be motivated. If we give them more rewards, more achievement things, they'll be there. What it says is that people are also driven by a sense of bonding and belonging, that we're social creatures, that I will do a lot to make sure that the people that I work with and that I surround myself with like me, and that I feel part of the group, that I feel like I have a sense of belonging. And this one is really, I think, for many organizations that they miss, that they don't necessarily tap into. And particularly from the fact of when you design some incentives or your compensation or your pay plan, do you put things in that inhibit this? Do you have people focus so much that they can't bond with their coworkers that are with them? And there's an aspect of that that I think is really key. And think about this in your own life. What do you do for your friends? You will go out of your way to help your friends, even if there is nothing in it for you, because they're your friends. You will do the same thing in a work situation. You will do the same thing as part of a team, making sure you're not the one who's letting down the team, etc. So with that, that is a element that is there. The next drive is this drive that is challenge and comprehend. This idea that we are driven to achieve goals, attain mastery, to learn, to improve, and to create. And when Lawrence and Nuria talked about this, this was really about learning and different things. One of the things that from our research that we've done on this and the work that we've done with organizations, it also gets to this idea of challenge. That if you set up a goal for me that I think is a stretch goal and I can achieve it, I'm more likely to go for it and be motivated by that. And this is really, I call this my video game drive, because if I play a video game and I'm starting it and I don't play very well and I trying to get through level 1 and I die and I do whatever it is, I fail at the thing, and then I get better and better and better. And then pretty soon I master level 1. And if I go to level 2, and level 2 is the same difficulty as level 1 is, or it doesn't change much, I'm not going to be playing that video game for very long. I will actually become very bored and I will no longer want to play that video game. So video game designers understand that. And so level 2 is typically harder than level 1, or it has different challenges that are new to you, and thus you have to learn more and be challenged on that. Same thing when you get to the next level. It changes, it makes it harder, it brings you different challenges that you need to overcome. And we as humans want that same thing. We don't like being bored. We don't like not growing, not feeling the sense of movement and purposeful moving forward. So that's the third one. And the last one is define and defend. And this is the one that I have when I talk with people. Sometimes it's hard to understand. Excuse me. But Lawrence and Noria talked about this, that, look, we used to be tribal in nature. Back the Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens were tribal in nature. And we were clans. We lived in small clans, and we would protect that tribe or that clan from outward threats, whether it be a saber-toothed tiger or whether it be the neighboring clan. And so we don't have tribes or clans anymore, but we can have a sense of feeling like the place that we work is this my tribe. If we feel affinity towards what they're doing, the purpose that the company is doing aligns with my own purpose in my life. And so if those match up and I feel a sense that the company is doing work that I appreciate and they're going to be there for me, I will be there for them. There's a reciprocity piece of this from a Cialdini perspective as well. So Robert Cialdini wrote Influence, and I'm sure you guys are well aware of that, but that's part of this as we're going into it. So with that, that is the 4 drive model. And what's really interesting, it's easy to remember because it's A, B, C, D. So acquire and achieve, bond and belong, challenge and comprehend, and define and defend. So with that, that's one of the models that you can use. And think about that in your own life. And think about particularly in work, but also in other areas of your life. Do you feel that sense like you're being satisfied at each of those levels? And if not, what can you do in order to move forward? Because we know that when all 4 levels get satisfied, our productivity and performance goes up exponentially. So any one piece at 1% improvement, as they score it on from a company perspective, gets a 2 to 3% increase in productivity. When all 4 go up 1%, that actually gets exponentiated, and you get a performance increase of 20 to 30%. So it's really important to have all of those as we're playing forward. I will stop there for a second in case anybody has a question. You can put it in the chat or just unmute and ask. Otherwise, I'm going to go into behavioral biases.
Okay, please go ahead. We usually take the questions after the presentation, so feel free to go ahead.
I will do that. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about some behavioral biases or behavioral insights that we have as humans that lend itself into motivation, particularly in thinking about how you design your work in order to motivate others, but also how you can design your own life to understand motivation. And so the first one I'm going to talk to you about is this concept of goal theories. So goal theories, when we think about this, goals are really powerful tools. And Gary Latham and John Locke have done a lot of work on goal theories from the late 1960s throughout the 70s and 80s. And we got the opportunity to chat with Gary Latham a couple different times and talk to him about some of these different theories. But just this concept that goals and setting specific goals increases our motivation to want to achieve them. And it goes back to challenge and comprehend when you think about that. And so this concept is this idea that goals themselves are really good if we think that they're achievable and that they push us beyond what we would normally do. If you put out there, just do your best versus having a specific goal, all of the research shows that having that specific goal is much more likely to increase performance and motivation to achieve it. But there's a couple other pieces, and this is goal gradient theory and illusionary goal progress, which kind of keystones some of the driving forces of this. Goal gradient theory, for those who are thinking about this. So goal gradient theory is this idea that the closer we get to our goal, the more that goal is a motivational factor for us. So we tend to work harder when we get closer to that goal. And I tell the story, my daughter is 11 right now. Her birthday is tomorrow. She's actually turning 12 tomorrow, but she's, I'm still thinking of her as 11 right now till tomorrow comes. But when she was younger, we would walk to a park, and the park is about 10 blocks away. And when she was really young, she started off excited and she'd be holding my hand and we'd be walking, but about 2, maybe 3 blocks in, she'd often get tired. She'd go, oh, carry me, carry me, carry me. So I'd have to pick up my daughter and carry her. And I'd carry her for about another 4 or 5 blocks, 6 blocks, until we got to where she could see the park. And once she could see the park, it was close. And so then she wanted down, and then she was running in front of me to get to the park. And it's the same thing. As we start to see that end line, that goal that we are aiming for, the more motivation that we have. And the reason that we start off excited and then we end up excited. Illusionary goal progress is that says that, look, our brains aren't very good at processing real progress versus progress that's illusionary. And this idea that if we can start by saying, hey, your progress is moving forward quickly, then we are really excited about that, and we get motivated by that as well. So we can start off with things faster. And here's a fantastic study, Ron Kivitz, who did this work, I believe it was at Columbia when he did it, but he had people get one of those cards that said, hey, if you buy 10 coffees, you get 1 free. And you just have to, every time you go in, we'll punch it, we'll mark it. And then after the 10th one, you turn it in, you get a free coffee. And what I loved is they did this and they did it with thousands and thousands of people. So it's 10,000 participants in the study. And for one, he gave this card that said, buy 10, get 1 free. And on average, it took 15.6 days for people to fill in that entire card. So what was really interesting is they did that for half of the people. And for the other half of the people, they said, we'll give them a card that says buy 12 and get 1 free, but hey, we're going to give you the first 2 automatically. Doesn't matter. So in essence, they have to buy 10 coffees. So exactly the same. If I'm an economist and a classical economist, not a behavioral economist, if I'm a classical economist, I would say this should have no difference. I have to buy 10 coffees with 1 card, 10 with the other. It should be exactly the same. But what they found, and this has been replicated not with just their study, but other studies that are similar and with other items beyond coffee, so it's not just a coffee thing, is that, look, with the 2 pre-punched and you have 10, the average was 12.7 days, almost 3 days faster. And they attribute this to illusionary goal progress. So this idea that, hey, I'm already well on my way to making this happen. And it amazes me when I think about this, because the increase in the speed of which you purchase this means that it's driving even your desire for the coffee, which seems kind of strange to me, but it's pretty fascinating when you look at this research. So understanding these 2 things, and how can you build these into both your work and your life? So from a work perspective, if you're designing something to motivate a team, what can you do to get a fast start going, to get people moving really quickly and achieving their goals? How can you take a large, big goal and break it down into milestones? And so to set goals so that you have that goal gradient. So I'm getting to point A, and now I see point A as opposed to way out here, that I get excited for that end. And then can you do some quick starts after that to, point B to point C to finally get to the end? So it's building in milestones. It's taking those pieces of this and understanding this is how we typically respond as people. And so as people, let's build our programs in order to tap into that motivation. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Self-selected goals. So again, keep staying on the goal piece of this. And this one is actually a lot of work that it was done on. This was with my co-host, Tim Houlihan. And Tim, in his prior work, did work with a company where they did incentives, and they developed a program that designed these ability to select goals and to have 3 different layers within those goals. And they did lots of studies, and again, thousands and thousands of reference points for this. So, and it showed over and over and over. So basically what this one did is they said they gave half of the group the percentage, basically a goal, and say, go out, do your best you can. We want you to achieve 5% growth, but if you get 2% growth, we'll pay you out at that level. And if you go above 10% growth, we'll pay you out even more. And basically, they said, go ahead and do your best. And the others, they said, hey, there are 3 levels. You get to choose. You get to choose, are you going to go for a 2% growth, 5% growth, or a 7% growth? And I don't know if it's 2, 5, or 7. They're changed all the time. But basically, it's those three markers. And the interesting thing on this is when they got to choose their own, right? There was a 0% increase in performance over the control study that they did when they said, just do your best. But when people got to select their own goal, there was a 34% increase in performance on that. Pretty significant. And this has been repeated over and over again, lots of different things. Now, part of this is that there's also a loss aversion component with how they did it. So they said, look, if you picked level 1, and that earned you whatever points or dollars or whatever that would be, and you achieved at level 1, you earned that. But if you achieved at level 2, it didn't matter. You just earned what you self-selected. And vice versa. If you selected level 2 and you had, that was associated with X number of points or whatever, and you surpassed level 1 performance, that 2% growth, and you made 3 or 4%, but you didn't reach the 5% growth, you got nothing. So there was a loss aversion piece that comes into this as well. So, I mean, there's other factors that come into this, but the self-selection is really interesting. And the other thing that they've found is they've done this research too. Oftentimes what we hear is like, well, if people self-select, they're going to select the easiest goal. And what they found is that's not the case. They actually, people would select a goal that was typically larger or harder than what their manager would have picked for them. So they're picking a harder goal, they're achieving that goal or getting higher performance of that goal much more than if you just say, don't do it. So again, think about this in your own life. What are the goals that you're self-selecting? How can you create goals for your team to be able to choose more? Any part of choice. Part of this comes into a sense of autonomy, that I'm being the one who is telling myself that I can achieve this. And this idea of self-identity, that idea that I picked this, I believe therefore that I can get it. So I believe that the goal is possible and I don't want to look like a fool. So I want to keep doing that. So lots of different motivational factors that go into why this is working like it is. So that one is really interesting. And again, you know, the awards were the same. They had to reach the same markers. They just didn't pick on those. So that was where that is. The next little bias that I want to talk about is this idea of the uncertainty effect. Many of you probably heard of this. It's the lottery effect. It's this idea that, you know, when you pull the lottery thing, if you always won X number of dollars, you're not going to, you know, feel as motivated. It's that uncertainty that actually gets that better. So we prefer that. What's interesting about this is that we prefer certainty over uncertainty. So if I had to choose, I would almost always say, give me the certain element. But when we actually look at research and saying what motivates us to higher performance, it's the uncertain result that gets us that. And this, I find, was a really fascinating study. So they basically said, again, 2 groups. They said, we want you to drink X amount of water in 2 minutes, a large amount of water in 2 minutes. And for half of the group, they said they would receive $2 for drinking the amount of water that they wanted. And for the other group, they said, you will either achieve $1 or $2 based on a coin flip at the end. If you achieve it, you'll either get $1 or $2. And so again, you would say, if I'm an economist, I would say, well, hey, $2 is going to be better than $1 or $2, regardless, because my chances of earning are going to be, with a coin flip, are going to be roughly $1.50. So I should be more motivated by $2. But what the research shows, of course, is that, hey, $2, 43% of the people finished the amount of water that they had decided that was the level. But when it was $2 or $1, it was 70% of the people that finished that. Again, classical economists would say, nope, that doesn't make sense. But human nature is this idea. So again, this idea of uncertainty, building in a lottery can be important. I will tell you, if you are running a company or you have a team and you be very careful about applying this. United Airlines in the US did a thing about a couple of years ago where they had all of their gate agents and baggage handlers had been on an incentive plan. And that incentive plan was the on-time departure of their planes. And based upon how well they did, they could earn a little bit. And on average, I think it was, and don't quote me on this, but on average, people would earn $500 to $800 US. Some of them maybe $1,500 US, but nobody really made a ton of money with this, but lots and lots of people earned. Well, some high paid consultant probably came in and had heard about the lottery piece and convinced United to take the money that they were spending on that. And instead of paying out a little bit to everybody, they said, look, we'll do the same thing, but instead of earning money, you'll earn basically opportunities in this lottery. So like different lottery tickets that you would get. So the more that you get, the more likely that you'll earn. And you could earn, I think there was $100,000 US a prize, but then there were also like a year-long lease for a Mercedes-Benz, different pieces like that. But it was a limited number. So I think there was only a couple people winning $100,000 and 10 people or so winning the Mercedes-Benz. Now, this research would say, oh, that works great. You're going to motivate those people. But again, understand that what do people want? Existing research suggests that we prefer certainty over uncertainty. And there was a massive backlash, lots of complaints, headlines in the New York Times, headlines in a number of publications about all the people hating this and how this was, taking money out of their pocket. Again, loss aversion plays into this and a number of other factors. But take that into account. So don't just replace your incentive program with a lottery type program. But if you're putting a new one in and you're thinking about how you can do this, this can be a very powerful way of thinking about putting something in, but also think about your own life and how do you want to do that in various different pieces. So, okay. Framing and how you talk about yourself or your motivation. This is important. And again, we understand from behavioral psychology and priming research that the way that we frame a statement changes how we interpret what that does and how it impacts our behavior as well as our motivation. So you can talk about something as a loss or a gain. You can talk about it as future focused or past focused, reflective. You can talk about it being positive or negative. Again, you can frame something like my peanut butter is 85% fat free, which is the exact same thing as saying my peanut butter is 18% fat, right? And you don't want to, the way that you say that is very different. And I like this research. Again, what they did is there was a university and they wanted to get people to register early. So they didn't want people registering late. So it was like, I think August 1st. And again, they split the group up. They sent half the group a message that was negatively framed, and they sent half a message that was positively framed. So one said, hey, we're going to give you a 15% discount if you register for this class before August 1st. The other one said, we're going to charge you a 15% penalty if you register after August 1st. Same amount of money. So again, a classical economist would say it shouldn't matter. The way that you frame it shouldn't matter because we are rational people. We think about this. Our brains will do the calculation and go, it doesn't matter. It's going to 15% off either way. But our brains fool us, right? And so when we think about this, when we have a discount, they did pretty good. 67% of people registered early. However, when we look at that compared to the penalty message, we had 93% of the people register early. That was the only difference, is just how they framed it. Did they frame it as a penalty or did they frame it as a discount? So therefore, again, the way that that was motivating people worked on a number of different levels. And so we have to understand how we talk about things, even how we talk about things to ourselves. Do we talk about, I have to go to the gym or I get to go to the gym, right? I talk about the way that what I'm, how much effort I have to put in, or what is the outcome that I'm going to achieve. And so the way that you frame your conversation, even if it's your self-talk, can really impact your motivation as well as others, particularly with others. If you're a boss, if you're a leader in an organization, the way you talk about something has a massive impact on people's motivation and how they respond. So think about that as you're moving forward. And this goes back into achievement words. I talked about that. We said we did some work, or we got to interview Gary Latham as part of the podcast a couple different times. And one of the research studies that he did was this fantastic thing where he worked with the president of a company. The president sent out a email every Monday morning to his entire team, about 500 people in the organization. Usually it was a, let's go get them, this is going to be a good week, let's go rah rah type of email. And what Gary asked is, look, can I just come in and can I replace 12 words? Just change 12 words or add 12 words in to this email. And they said yes. And so they split it in half, basically said two versions. One had the 12 achievement words in it, the other one didn't. At the end of the week, they looked at people's performance as was rated by their managers who didn't know which email they got. So there was a kind of a blind sense here. And when they said that, there was a 15% improvement in performance for those who had the achievement words. And there was a 35% increase in efficiency. The way and not sure exactly how they measured efficiency, but it was all by adding in words like prevail, accomplish, compete, strive, triumph, achieve. These words that invoke the sense of achievement, that you're really going out there and doing this. That was the only difference in this. And again, they repeated it with some other companies and other ways of doing this. And they found again that certain words, your word choice impacts how people perform. And the more that you can get people focused in on achievement and positive and striving and those things that you go and you work for, the more motivated we're going to be. So I used to be a big naysayer, somebody who doubted and didn't believe in those posters on the wall. I don't know if you had these down in Brazil, but the motivational, like, together we can achieve more, soar above with the eagle, or, some teamwork, all those things. And I would say that's not really going to impact. But what this kind of demonstrates is, yeah, actually those messages on the wall, those kind of achievement messaging that you do can have an impact. So again, think about what it is that you're thinking about doing. All right. I just have a couple more things and then we'll lead into the final pieces here. So again, we talked about this work that this idea of, I'm going to say this as a say-do gap. So this idea that we don't understand our own motivations. And so when you ask people what will motivate them, we rationalize that. So we typically choose money over other things, whether that be a trip or merchandise or other factors. Again, if you get to choose your reward, 70 to 80% of people will always say money. Give me cash, give me dollars, right? But this idea that we don't necessarily understand how well we're motivated or what motivates us is really key. And so this was research. Again, Tim Houlihan, my co-host, his company did this along with Scott Jeffrey, who is this PhD that did this. And so basically, I'm going to actually start with this. So they had, again, they split the group up and they basically gave half of the group, basically they said, if you do this, achieve this, you'll earn $100. For the other half, they said you'll earn a massage, which was equivalent to it was cost $100, but it was a massage that you would get. Now, again, a classical economist would say, well, the $100 should outperform the non-$100 or the massage, because not everybody likes a massage. And if I have $100, I can buy the massage, or I can buy other things that I would like. But when we looked at the performance lift, it showed that 14% improvement on cash, which isn't bad, over a control group. They had a control group that didn't have any awards. So the performance lift was 14%. But when you put the non-monetary, the massage out there, it was a 39%, almost 40%. So almost 3 times more than what the performance lift was there. What was interesting is they went backwards and they asked people after the fact. They said, would you prefer to receive the cash value of the prize rather than the prize itself? And if you look at this, 36% strongly agreed, and 13, I mean, more than 50% of the people were on the higher end. So even knowing that they did this and they performed better, they still said I would have preferred the cash, even though it proved different. So sometimes what we say and what we do are 2 very different things. And particularly if you ask people in surveys, again, I'm not saying replace all of your cash programs with non-cash programs, but understand that there are differences in what we do. And then fairness, perceived fairness. So this is a little different. So fairness is one of these things that isn't necessarily a motivator. We don't get motivated to go above and beyond if something is fair. But if we perceive something to be unfair, then we are demotivated. We actually will do a lot to kind of do this. So people know the ultimatum game. Basically, you have 2 people in it. One person gets $10 or whatever dollar amount it is, and then the other person gets to do, say, a split. So you give me $1 and you get $9, you give me $5, I get $5, etc. And then the other person gets to accept or deny that. There's no negotiation. You don't get to go back and forth. You either accept it or you deny it. Again, I go back to this classical economist who would say, the person who is being offered whatever is offered to you, you should accept. Because if they offer you $1, you're $1 better off than you were before. And you're not doing anything except for agreeing to it. You're not putting any effort into this. So it should be an easy perspective to say, yes, give me the $1, you get $9. But in fact, what happens is that in most instances, and they've done this at various different levels across different countries, it's usually about $3 or 30%. And for some people, it's 50%. You have to split it evenly with me, or I'm going to deny you the opportunity to earn that. So again, very interesting piece on this. And I'm going to demonstrate this, and maybe people have seen this, but Frans de Waal, famous researcher, primatologist, but they did some really interesting work with capuchin monkeys. So I'm going to play this. Hopefully you guys can hear it. And it's kind of funny. So hopefully we'll end on a high note and some laughter here, but here you go.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put 2 capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the 2 monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, it's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically.
All right, so that is the capuchin monkey. So I always talk about this as, look, as this is ingrained, this fairness element in our DNA. And as much as I would like to say that we're different, we're not really that different than capuchin monkeys. So with that, thank you. So I will answer, take questions as we go from there. So.
Thank you, Kurt. It was perfect. Thank you very much.
Hopefully there was something insightful for everybody to take away. Something.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of things we can apply tomorrow in our organizations and also on our personal lives. So it was awesome. Thank you. So to start with the questions, you talked about motivation, but I would like to ask about a little bit of your history.
Okay.
Because you're the president of the Lantern Group. That's a company that applies behavior insights to solve problems inside the organizations. But the Lantern Group was founded back in 1997, and I believe things might have been different back then because the behavioral science was not so well developed. And so, how did the behavioral science got into your business?
That's a really good question. So the company has morphed. So when I started the Lantern Group, we did a lot of work around working with executives on strategic planning, around team development, and various different pieces. But I've always had an interest in understanding why people do what they do. I went back actually after I'd started the company to get my PhD. So I actually was working on my PhD, and that was around employee motivation, understanding if personalities would influence performance in a short-term contest, and so various different pieces within that. And as the company grew and we got further into it, I started applying more and more of that. And so probably around 2005, 2006, we really made a concerted effort to start really looking at. Been working with incentives since 2001, so we got work with incentives and building out incentive plans for companies and applying some of the just psychological principles that were around at that point. And so we would do that. But 2005, 2006, and then in 2008, the 4-drive model I identified. We read about it in an HBR article, and then did a big switch and starting applying that inside organizations. And so over the course of time, I think there has been a massive shift in behavioral science likelihood that a company will apply it. And I attribute that to a lot of the books that are out there, Predictably Irrational, Nudge, some of the more popular press books that have made this more salient for people who are maybe not really interested in the science side of things, but are reading about how this applies. I will tell you, I worked with a company where the leadership team had read Drive by Dan Pink. Now, I have issues with some of the findings in Drive, but what they realized is that this idea that money is the only motivator, and that if you just pay people more, we could get better performance. Basically, it said that, no, that's not the case. And the leadership company realized that. And so we were able to start working with them. And so started working with the president of that company in kind of looking at how they were designing their incentives and how they were managing people and applying some of these behavioral science insights into that.
Great, thank you. Flávia?
Great, Kurt. Amazing, like so many insights and concepts also, new ones, behavioral biases. Thanks a lot. We have many questions here, but one of the questions a little bit about now, the pandemic. Not so long ago, there was a discussion about happiness in the workplace, but now workplace feels like a blurred concept. So how can behavioral science help to improve happiness and well-being, in your opinion, for workers, being remote, in person, and hybrid? For instance, how can remote work be related to bond and belong?
Yeah, happiness is an interesting piece because there has been lots of research. Sean Aker, Dan Gilbert talk a lot about the different elements of happiness and how happiness. We always think about happiness as an end result, but what they've shown is that the happier people get better results, and so it's the chicken or the egg. It's they get reversed. Given this idea of a happy workplace, right? And so, at least in the U.S., I'll bring a U.S. perspective in on this. There are lots of companies that did a lot, probably in the late, or early 2000s to 2010, 2015, of putting in pool tables and having free food and kind of having a environment that was more playful inside of their organization, in the work building itself. And what I think most of the research that they found on that, or at least the anecdotal information that I've heard, is that had a little impact, right? But it was, happiness is more than just having a pool table or having free food or a keg of beer in the fridge. That isn't really what drives happiness. Happiness is driven by a number of other things about, how do I feel about the work that I'm doing? How do I feel about the people that I'm working with? Do we have an open relationship that we can, be working on fun, innovative things that are of a natural interest to me? And so I think that is really important to think about. I think then when we think about the working from home, working in a hybrid situation or working in an office, there are things that you can do. I think the hardest is if you're working from home and you don't want to be working from home, because there's a lot of happiness. A lot of this is about that belong sense, that we're social creatures, right? We don't like necessarily being alone. And if you live by yourself, and even if you have a family, you want to expand that and have those relationships with others. And that isn't as easy over Zoom, over virtual type of communication. And so whatever you can do to safely kind of get back together, if you're a leader in an organization, not saying you have to have people come back into the office, but can you set up times where people get together? Can you set up these non-work situations that we can gather together? Can you set up work situations where we all come together safely and are able to strategize about where we're going and envision what the future would be, and just relax and not have it so focused that it's all work, but that it's work and that it's getting to know each other on a better level. I think some of those things can do it. I think hybrid has the ability to be able to do that if you can get your team together at certain points. And I think obviously at work you can do that. in the way that it's done. But again, I think it's more than just like the environment that you set up. It's more about what the type of work that you're working on, who you're working with, the type of manager that you have. Are you over like critiquing everything, micromanaging, or are you giving people the autonomy to say, you know, here's what we want you to do. How are you going to go do it? I'll help you however I can, but I trust you. So I think there's a lot of that goes into that.
Perfect, Kurt. Yeah, I truly agree. Yeah, and we are learning, yeah, all the time how to work on this scenario. And now I wanted to hear about your vision of the pandemic and hybrid work. But how can we not talk about incentives and rewards when we think about you and Tim also? And you have portrayed many times that monetary incentives doesn't work as much as other incentives. And we are curious to know, like, are there one or two non-monetary incentives that you like the most, that you recommend? Or like
so I'm going to go two different ways here. So one, I'm going to go like a corporate type of incentive that is a big program that a company would put in place. And the one that I find that is very motivating is, and again, I'm going to focus this on, I do a lot of work with sales organizations. So it's the salespeople, and you have salespeople are out there selling on their own often, but they form up to a district. So they have a territory to a district to a region. And the best sales incentives that I've seen, the ones that I find most powerful and that we often interview salespeople when we talk to them, when we ask them what has been the most impactful incentive that you've ever been a part of. And there's typically two things that come up. One is, and it's not necessarily incentive, what is the best recognition that you've ever got? We'll make sure that we frame it from recognition perspective. One is, I've gotten a handwritten letter or note, not just from my boss, but from my boss's boss or the president or the vice president of the organization. That wasn't just a generic thank you for what you did, but it really spelled out what you did and how, and the impact that had on the company. That was it. It was just a hand, and people talked about, I have it up on my wall, I look at it every day, all of those things. The other thing from a sales perspective that has been very powerful and is really big, I talked about that territory, district, region, is doing a travel award that is a team award. So it's not me individually winning, it's my district winning. And the travel doesn't have to be to some far away, extravagant place. It can just be somewhere local, but you go for a weekend and you bring your spouse or significant other with you. And so you have this chance to bond. You have this chance to belong. You get this nice reward. You get a chance to be away. You get the reward, so achieve and acquire. You get the bond and belong. You also get this element where there was a challenge. You won this. You had a challenge to either achieve a certain goal to win that, or you were the best of the best, whatever it was. There was a challenge piece of this. And lastly, this kind of building this community kind of bonds you more within the organization. So it helps in that defend part too. So it kind of taps into all four of those. So I think those are two different ones, two very different, right? One is just a simple handwritten thank you. Thank you for what you've done. It's taking the time. It's not a form letter. It's not typed up. It's written. And the other one is the team award. And actually, I will also say, anytime that you can really focus in on a team, I find those really powerful. So.
Amazing. Perfect. Thanks, Kurt. Artur?
Kurt, you're part of the Diversify network. Flávia is also part of the Diversify. We have Sebastian here. And I believe one of the goals of Diversify is to deal with all the cultural differences between countries. And I wonder, how does cultural and hierarchical structures impact motivational drivers, and for instance, in Brazil, we have the power distance index is one of the highest of the world, while in the US is very low. how do you think this affects like prescriptions and when you want to apply behavioral changes in an organization?
Yeah, so I can't talk specifically about, what individual differences. I just don't know enough about Brazil or China or different pieces. I kind of have been, I'm your really sad American who is very American. We live and breathe in our American world, which I'm trying to get rid of. I'm trying to expand and to move beyond. I know it's a bad thing, but with that, culture is really important on motivation, and I will go as that the motivational pieces that I've talked about here, you need to test. You need to understand, does that fit within your company, within your own culture, within those things? I will tell you that I've seen different companies have very different responses with very similar motivational pieces that you put in place. And that's just companies, because one might be more of an engineering firm, and so the type of people that you have there are different than a more of an entrepreneurial or a sales type approach, and so different. You have to preach those differently. Same thing from a nation or a region around the world. You need to understand that you will have less if it's a tight culture versus a loose culture. And I forget who has talked about that recently. There's been some real good research on that. China and many of the Eastern Asian countries are very tight, that they're more of a collective. You look to the community to make your decisions, and really thinking less about you individually and more about the community, versus loose organizations or loose cultures, which it's more individualistic. I'm looking out for me. And you have very different incentive programs that go into place there. You're not going to have the best of the best, isn't going to necessarily be the right type of incentive program to put in place in that way, because they're not going to have the same motivational, because it's about how do we improve everybody's lot. And so you think about what that is, and you think about some of the underlying human drives that we have. And I think that's how that plays in. So I don't know if I answered your question, but culture definitely does play a role in motivation. You need to test, you need to do experimentation, which is what scientists do, and looking to understand that. And I think you need to really take that into account as you're planning and building anything for a company versus even for yourself. So.
Perfect, thank you. Now we're moving to the questions from the chat. Gabriel, would you like to open your microphone?
Yeah, sure.
There you go.
First of all, thanks, Kurt. It was a very nice talk. And some ideas came popping in my head, especially about the challenge part, because challenge can be a good motivator. But if the challenge is perceived as unfair, I think it could backlash. My question is, how do you find balance between a fair challenge that motivates people and the challenge that is perceived as unfair that could backlash? And I mean, if it's too hard, I think people won't do it. They just think, well, I can't do it. It's too much for me, right?
Yeah. You bring up the number one issue when we talk with salespeople, is that particularly when you have salespeople who have set goals, right? The goal is X, and what is the number one complaint that we get is that goal is unfair, right? I can't achieve that goal, or I look at my goal and I have to grow 10%, and the territory next to me has to grow 5%, and that's not fair. And so companies have to, it's a fine line that you have to walk on between this fairness piece and the challenge piece, because what you need to make sure that you're doing is a couple things. One is making sure that whatever you put in place is fair. And fair doesn't mean that everybody gets the same growth or the same challenge or different pieces, but that that you have the same, if you put forth the same amount of effort and the same amount of hard work, that you're as likely to perform as somebody else. So that if I'm in a big city, I don't have an unfair advantage over somebody who is in a rural or country area. Or if I have a certain client that is different than somebody else's, and we know that this is going to be there. Or if I have a large volume territory versus somebody who has a small volume territory. So those are sales things, and that's on that side. But even just in general, if I'm putting some motivational component in there and I want people to stretch and challenge themselves, I need to make sure that it feels like I'm not being penalized because of my situation or who I am or different things, which gets hard because sometimes the way that you motivate people is a subjective measure, right? You can't quantify certain things. And so how do you make sure that that doesn't feel unfair? And so the way that you can do that, or I've seen being able to accomplish that, is to really focus in on making sure people understand what goes into a goal. The self-selected goals that we talked about can go a long way in alleviating that. So here are 4 options for you or 3 options for you, and you get to pick. What do you want to pick? And your rewards are different in each of those, but you get to pick which is your goal. Or have people involved in their own goals. And this doesn't mean that you let them choose their goal per se, but they get input. And so the more that I feel like I've had a say in what you're telling me to do, that challenge that you want me to achieve, that's important. The other way, and I'm listing off a whole bunch of things here, and I apologize. Another way is, as I talked about this idea of having a group or a team goal, and if you can say as a company, we're aiming for this, and that can be kind of aspirational. That can be really far out there. And what I've seen is that when companies do that well, that they can put that in there, it's kind of amazing what that does for everybody. It brings everybody up. That if the company achieves this, we all win. And we all have those components that go on that. I think I've probably talked enough there. I apologize if I just was rambling off a bunch of different factors, but I think the big piece is it's not easy, and you do have to take into consideration this fairness idea versus how it is there. And if I get a goal and you tell me I need to be challenged up to this, and I go, I can't do that, then I am not going to be motivated at all. And particularly if I feel like the person next to me got an easier goal and it's going to be much easier for them to achieve it, then you've demotivated me. And so it's a tough thing to do. So
thanks a lot.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, of course, yes.
One more thing on that, and this is what I coach with some of the clients that I work with, is sometimes companies go in, and again, our brains fool us, right? And so we aren't very good at figuring out math and trends and different things. And so when we set maybe a quarterly goal for somebody, and again, I'm talking a lot of sales, so I take that into consideration as I'm thinking this. But oftentimes you get a goal, and you know from the data and from the statistics that that goal is achievable, because the trend is like this, and you're just asking them to grow this. But when they see it, they're starting back here and they're saying, oh, this is the goal you want, and you want me to grow this much? That's crazy. And so the way that you can break that down, if you can break it down, again, going back to that goal, like, all right, that means what you need to do is each month you need to get this much. And that means each week you need to get this much. And so breaking that big goal down into smaller steps, it means like, I need to get 1 more sale from 1 customer a week, or 2 more sales from, every customer a week, whatever it is. And it depends on what that is. Or it means I need to improve my time by X every week on this, as opposed to those things. So the more discrete that you can make it, the more fair it typically feels and the more achievable it feels. So another piece of that.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, that last one is a really interesting idea. I've never thought about it. like this in this training. Thanks.
Yeah. So, all right.
No.
Sorry, I went off.
No, we're delighted to have you here. And now a question from Castello. Castello, would you like to open your microphone?
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Are you hearing me well? Okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Kurt, first of all, thank you so much for all the insights. I'm going to apply that tomorrow, maybe, at my workplace. The first, what really hit me was about the fairness and the monkey experiment, because I live in a kind of workplace which has this environment, but instead of receiving cucumbers and grapes, no matter how well we return the rocks, we always get cucumbers. You know, even if the monkey returns 2 rocks or clean the rock before or return it faster than the other, you always get 1 cucumber, okay? I work at the public sector in a city hall, and going to my question, we can rely on the upper management to reward us or give a recognition for it. So, talking about self-motivation or motivation coming from colleagues, how we can self-management this thing about motivation and enhance performance.
Yeah, Costello, that fantastic question, and we see that happening, right? In some organizations, they're just not designed, or they have limitations put on them outside, whether that because of the government rules and regulations and how they have to do that, or they just don't have the money to be able to do this. You bring up a really good point. So how do I self-motivate? How do I then get that feeling, that sense of accomplishment to keep moving on, and that fairness element? And this idea of so fairness is one of those aspects that is hard, right? Because if the company is if you feel it's like, I'm going above and beyond what, you know, this person just brings the rock back, I'm cleaning the rock, I'm making the rock prettier, I'm doing it faster, I'm doing it better, and I get the same reward as them. And that's just hard. It's hardwired inside of us. So it's hard to do. The fact of the matter, though, is you can take some of the other drives that we had to self-motivate yourself. So you can go, how am I, you know, what am I learning about the rock? And this will be a bad analogy. I will start off saying it's going to be a bad analogy right away. But, you know, why, you know, how much better can I get at, how fast can I do this? So it's a challenge to myself. So I'm challenging myself to say, I did the rock in 10 seconds before. Can I do it in 9 seconds? Can I do it in 9 seconds and flip it over? Or can I do it in 9 seconds and clean it? Can I do it in 8 seconds now? And so it's a challenge to me to beat my best. And so then it's about who I am as an individual. Company-wise, if the company isn't providing those things for you, then you have to think about that. And the other way to think about that is, can I take the skills that I've learned in this rock and getting this rock back better? Can I then take that and transfer that to another company that might be able to provide me with the recognition that they will appreciate the fact that I can do that rock movement in 8 seconds instead of 10 seconds. And if you can show that, and then that's that motivation at the end, that's that longer term piece of what is my goal? Well, my goal is not to just get better at returning that rock, because I'm never going to get rewarded for that here. But if I can translate taking that rock and doing better in that, and move that either to get promoted within the company or to move on to another company that is going to recognize me, maybe that's something that I can utilize for that. Bad example, but there's aspects of that is to think that if a company can't do that, you know, there's it. If you're trying to think about your team and other people on your team, you can do the recognition piece that I said about the manager writing that note. Is you can do your, hey, you know, Costello, I saw that you did really good on the rock today, you know, fantastic job. You know, you're putting me to shame. I'm going to have to, you know, step up my game and almost make it a competition between you guys, you know, others, and that can work as well. And that's just self-done. there are things that you can do like that, but that's taking initiative. And if the company's not rewarding you for it, sometimes people are going to say, why do I want to do that? Because I'm still going to get a cucumber. So, okay.
Excellent. Now, Sebastian, would you like to open your microphone?
Sim. Obrigado. Kurt, one question about framing, right? So
Yeah.
we usually try to understand better the effect of framing in different set of populations and groups. And something that I particularly have conducted some research in the healthcare sector, right? And the difference between decision making from healthcare professionals and patients, right? And I have seen that the framing effects still holds true for those different populations, right? But what we haven't seen, particularly in experts, when they are forecasting future events, when they have accumulated somehow expertise and knowledge, they can differentiate a little bit better the framing that is presented for the future events, right? So the framing aspects that is presented. So my question is, why do you think that framing doesn't hold true for people who are experts on the field? Do you think that is more linked to gut feeling, intuition, expertise that have built over time? Or do you think that is the access to asymmetric knowledge or asymmetric understanding of the future events?
So I think there's a couple things there, and Sebastian, you bring up some really interesting point, is that framing with different populations and different personalities impacts people differently. And so a frame for one person might be really motivational, the same frame for somebody else may not be. And some of that is based on expertise. I think for the expertise, there's a couple things. And again, I don't have, this is just me in responding based on, I don't have data to support this, in other words. Part of this is, part of the reason that framing works is because the frame primes our brain and in the way, it's either setting it in a positive or a negative or however you're framing it. So it's priming that the way your neural pathways are operating. And so it's easier to go down one pathway versus another pathway. I think when you have experts, the different pathways, they have more pathways that they can look at. And so the framing isn't necessarily and this is, I'm oversimplifying this, right? I'm oversimplifying this idea of neural pathways because you have billions and billions of different pathways at work. But the idea is that, it's not didactic. It's not this positive frame versus a negative frame, that when you're an expert, you see all these variations in between. Yeah. And so it doesn't go all the way over here. It might only go to here. And so I think that might be some of the reasons that this is, you have different neural pathways that get primed, that get lit up first, and now you have different ways of going down that, but you understand more, so there's various different paths that can take. I also think you talked about this, just the general amount of information that you have. And so a frame is less likely to impact your decision because you have pre-held beliefs about these things. And so you have some expertise based upon that pre-held beliefs. Framing works best when it's a situation that is ambiguous or you're uncertain or various different pieces of it. And so the more knowledge you have, the less likely that that's going to happen. It's not saying that it doesn't impact even those. Again, you've heard the research on, doctors are told that this procedure has a 90% success rate, or doctors that receive that has a 10% failure rate. And again, they're more likely to, prescribe that procedure if they're said it's a 90% success rate. And again, they're experts. They should know this, but again, those are different factors. So.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kurt, Josie from the chat, she raised a question about the vaccination for COVID-19. And of course, we're talking about motivation, and it's an interesting thing to think about. We had a mega study with the effects of lottery for vaccination. So what's your take? Is there a way to motivate people to go and have being vaccinated, or have we hit a wall or something like that on vaccination rates?
So Katie Milkman and a number of people from researchers on the what's it called, Behavior Change for Good group, and they did a mega study on lotteries in the U.S. And again, I'll quote that was the U.S. and this was well after vaccines had come on. And so they put in Ohio, which is a state in the United States, had put in a pretty big lottery into like people, you can win $1 million if you have that. They also looked at some other states that had smaller lotteries on that. And the sad thing is what they found is that the lotteries didn't really significantly impact vaccination rates. And they talked a little bit about why they thought that might be. And one of the reasons was that the people who are going to be influenced by that had already been vaccinated, so that there wasn't that big of a pool, because people had hardened their beliefs so strongly, and it was about their self-identity, that a vaccine is, at least in the United States, it has become very political in how people are viewing it. And that, you know, a vaccine is the government trying to tell me what to do, and a number of conspiracy theories. We've done some podcasts on conspiracy theories lately, and the number of weird conspiracy theories out there about vaccinations are crazy. I won't go into that, but from a motivational perspective, it's hard to get people to change their innate belief systems about who they are, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, I'm this type of person, and I'm the person that won't or doesn't need a vaccine, and I'm not believing that. So it gets really hard. So what we have seen, one of the things I didn't talk about here from a motivational perspective, is social proof and social peer pressure. And so again, we're motivated by the reference group that we have, looking at what they're doing. It's that sense of belonging. I don't want to get kicked out of the tribe, and so I need to stay and do what the tribe is doing. And I don't want to do that where I get a feeling like the tribe is wrong. So I believe that the tribe, whatever the tribe is doing, is right, and then I go and do that, and you do it more often. And so I think what we have seen is some of the messaging pieces coming from appropriate people within the tribe, showcasing that more people are actually vaccinated than what people see. All of those kind of things can come into that. But vaccines are hard. Anytime you have behavior that is predicated on who I feel I am, my sense of self-identity, it's hard to get people to change that behavior, because you'll get pushback. You'll get a variety of other things that go on. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As we're heading towards the end of our meetup, we cannot finish without the speed round questions. So coffee or tea?
Oh no, I'm scared.
Coffee or tea?
I used to be tea. I would be 100% tea if you even asked me 2 years ago. But now it's like 50-50. I had tea earlier today. I still have the tea bag in here. I know that's bad. But
come on,
coffee yesterday. I had coffee yesterday.
You can't be both, right? So
I can, you know, we get lots of people that's like coffee or tea. I am 50-50. It depends on if I'm Monday morning or Tuesday morning and how cold it is.
In the next ones, you can go both ways, all right? Irrationality or bounded rationality?
Bounded rationality, bounded rationality.
Of course.
All the way, Herbert Simon, right there. I mean, this is the idea that, you know, we are both we're not irrational, right? I mean, rational is this, we do things because there's been some evolutionary trait probably that has helped us there. And it makes us feel whatever it is. And it's just within these boundaries and how we frame it and how we think about it. So yeah, bounded rationality.
Perfect. Behavior science or behavior economics?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble here. But I'm going to go behavioral science. So I think behavioral economics, and I know this is supposed to be a speed round, so I shouldn't elaborate on this, but I'm going to. So behavioral economics, I think, was a really good tool to move, movement, right? That basically identified more within the economics field than the psychology field. It was this mirroring of psychology with economics. Kahneman and Tversky, Richard Thaler were some of the originals. You know, Kahneman and Tversky are psychologists. Thaler was the economist, and they had to make a bigger change in the way the economists were thinking about things and just that overarching piece. And so they did a really good job in looking at this and bringing in bounded rationality and some of these other factors that said your classical economic perspective doesn't hold true. And, you know, most economists, if you really ask them, they knew that. I mean, they used simplified models of the world, but really having these things put in their face to say that doesn't hold true at all, really it got them to be thinking about this and implementing it in. What I think that did is it opened up this door to just study human behavior in general. And what behavioral economics did is it said, I'm taking economics and psychology, both of these social factors that are looking at human behavior. And what behavioral science is saying is, why we don't need to limit it to behavioral science or to economics and psychology. We can bring sociology in, we can bring neuroscience in, anything that has to touch. And let's bring all of these different practices, these different disciplines to understand human behavior from a much more holistic perspective. And I think that's where we're going. That's where I'm excited to see. I don't know neuroscience very well, but man, it's fascinating to me to see where it's all leading and what that does. So behavioral science.
Okay. So based on your explanation, Kahneman or Taylor?
Oh, you make it hard. I will say this. I've actually talked with Danny Kahneman. So I missed the opportunity to talk with Taylor. He had to reschedule the time that we talked with him, and it was in a different piece. So I will have to go with Kahneman just because he was a little bit earlier. He kind of inspired Thaler to his piece and different things. Just FYI for everybody that's on, Tim and myself are collaborating with Andy Luttrell, who has Opinion Sciences podcast. If you haven't listened to it, fantastic podcast. But we're going to do a series early in 2022 that is the history of behavioral economics. Not behavioral science, but behavioral economics. And we interviewed Kahneman, we interviewed Thaler, we interviewed Colin Kammerer. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. We have a whole bunch of people that we've interviewed. We're going to kind of walk through in five different episodes the history of behavioral economics and where it's moving into. So that'll be coming out. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it. So biases or noise?
Biases.
Okay. Monetary rewards or non-monetary rewards?
Both.
You can have it.
Not accepted here. Not only one.
So here, monetary rewards that are going to be so if I am putting in place an incentive that I want people to continually, so if I'm a salesperson and I have a quarterly goal, I want to have a monetary award to achieve the main drivers of the organization. I want to put a non-monetary reward in when I have something that is special, that goes above and beyond, or to reward those people who are going above and beyond what they should be doing on an everyday basis. So it's the combination. So I will say both on this, but it depends on the situation. You have that monetary, that is that every day because it's part of what we're doing. But you have maybe it's a 2-week program that you really want to get people focused in on something, or it's a month-long initiative, or it's something along those matters. That's where you put in a non-monetary component within that.
Okay, thank you. So the last one, dinner with your favorite researcher, your favorite athlete, your favorite musician, or Uncle Tom?
Oh my gosh, Tim will be mad at me because I'm not going to say musician. But I'm like trying to determine if it's my favorite sports figure or if it's my researcher. And I'm going to have to go with researcher, even though I would love to have, actually, I'll take that back. I might get to talk with my favorite researcher on the podcast. So I'm going to go with dinner with the sports figure. There we go. So
okay, so but you can hang us like that. Who is your favorite researcher and who is your favorite athlete?
All right. So
you can talk about your favorite musician as well.
Yeah, well, favorite musician, we're leaving that off the table because then Tim will get mad at me whatever I say. But this so favorite researcher that we haven't talked to, that I think would be really, there's a couple actually, and so I'm gonna say one, and then I'll later tonight I'm gonna go, oh my gosh, I should have said this other person, right? Do they have to be alive? This is one of those things? Do they have to be alive?
No, you can pick.
Okay, anyone. So it would be Amos Tversky. If I could, everything I've heard about Amos Tversky is he was just this brilliant researcher. If I had to pick somebody that was alive today to do that, there's a number that I would pick. I've talked with George Lowenstein, but I would love to sit down and just have dinner with George Lowenstein. I think he'd be great. Dan Gilbert, just to talk about some of his research on happiness. Like we talked about some of the happiness stuff earlier. Would love that. Athlete though is really easy. It's you talked about the Timberwolves earlier. I've been a big Timberwolves fan forever, and it would be Kevin Garnett, former Minnesota Timberwolf. Would love to. He's just a crazy character, and oh my gosh, I just think that dinner would be fantastic. So.
Perfect. Kurt, thank you so much. It was amazing.
Well, I'm glad. Hopefully people got something out of it. I appreciate all of the questions. I appreciate all of you guys listening to me, go on and on and on. So thank you for that. If you do have, I'm happy if anybody ever wants to reach out to me and just ask a question. If you have a question about a specific topic or different thing, you can tell I have passion about this. I'm happy to respond. You can. My email is kurt@lanterngroup.com. You can email me. We're out on Twitter, Behavioral Groove. My Twitter is Motivation Guru. You can ask me a question there. Feel free. LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Kurt W. Nelson at there. So feel free to reach out, connect. Happy to talk and give you my 2 cents, even if it's only worth 2 cents. And 2 cents isn't worth a lot in the US right now. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Kurt. And para as pessoas que não conhecem o podcast, gostou dele também, tem o Behavior Groups. I speak in Portuguese about the podcast. It's amazing, and that's why we did also the speed test, and you understand more about it. Oh, I did in English. E aí vocês vão entender por que esse teste aí no final e tudo mais, tá bom, gente? A gente recomenda bastante. Yeah. So thanks.
Excellent.
Yes, thanks a lot, Kurt. Yeah, it was very, very nice to have you with us. Hopefully we'll meet many other times.
Yes.
So next time.
Well, thank you guys.
Next time get to be the groups, right? So we bring Tim and Kurt. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah, it would be amazing.
Be awesome.
Yeah. Then you'll hear about a musician for 30 minutes when you talk about the favorite musician and why, and what type of sonic, cadence they use in their music and why it'd be so fantastic to talk to them. So there you go. But thank you guys. I appreciate everybody and look forward to, I would love to talk more with anybody because again, as we said, just loving to hear more about the context of what you guys are working in and what are some of the things that you're seeing, because I think it makes a difference. And so thank you for all that you guys do. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Obrigado, pessoal, pela presença.
Let's take a picture. I think Kurt is already there. Yeah. If someone,
I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's try to take it. I don't know if some of them left. Pessoal, alguém quer
Quem puder abrir as câmeras.
Câmeras. If not, we'll take from us. But Hugo, oi, Hugo. Rosane, aí o pessoal abrindo. Let's see if someone else. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, perfect. I'll send you, Kurt.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Have a wonderful
Thanks
evening.
so much.
You too. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.